Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 28th day of March in the year of our Lord 2025. Today I will be talking about the recently declassified and released 80,000 files, so far 80,000, concerning the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Those files remind us of the immense power of the deep state, how its members tend to close ranks when threatened because they derive great wealth, great power from their membership in the deep state. I remember that day, November 22nd, 1963, quite clearly. I was 15 years old and at a high school track meet when the news told the world what supposedly happened. The coach called us over and told us the meet was over, the school was closed for the day. It was scary. Sobering time for a 15-year-old trying to make sense of the world anyway. But this report's not just a rehash of the assassination, but maybe it is instead a look at what it all means for the world, how its aftermath still resonates in the world today. That day was an eye-opener for some people, but for most of us it's taken decades for our eyes to fully open. Polls taken throughout the 1950s revealed that over 70% of Americans trusted the government, believed that it would do what is right, quote, most of the time. A follow-up question showed that most of the time meant just about always. November 22, 1963 began a long decline in the public's confidence that is greater today than at any other time in our history. The former trust in government is gone. Today's polls show only about 22% still trust in government. Was the assassin an individual or group of individuals with some ideological difference that drove the action, or was the murder simply an effort to grab the reins of power? Which of the two explains JFK's murder? Was Lee Harvey Oswald the assassin? If so, was he a solo actor or part of a greater conspiracy? We have learned that the government can't be trusted to tell us the truth about anything, and its representatives seem quite often to have sinister motives. Those motives, whatever they may be, sometimes prove fatal for those little people, sometimes referred to as the masses. Those people are viewed by government and its representatives as sheep to be sheared or fodder for the cannons of whatever stupid, senseless war government chooses for us the next time. So, if they know we no longer trust them, what can they do to ensure support and loyalty from the masses? Philosophers over the centuries have thought about this, have written of the formula government uses to keep us motivated and committed to their next scheme. The simplest part of the formula is to make sure there's always a sinister bad guy or government of bad guys that threaten us. They threaten our way of life. If we don't go abroad and fight the bad guys on their home turf, we will have to fight them here on our own turf sooner or later. There's never enough time to analyze whether the bad guy is truly bad, truly means to do us harm before the bombing starts or other means of war might be launched. The end result is usually a lot of dead people, a lot of money added to our future as debt. JFK's death and the cover-up of the truth behind it explains what the government and its spokespeople have come to call conspiracy theories. There are few things in this world as bad as wearing that label today because it means you're not evil like a racist, just naive and probably stupid because you don't believe the government's obvious lies. I will admit it's far easier to just accept whatever cockamamie explanation the government gives us for its crimes. For example, resisting the government's COVID policy was very difficult, although healthier. In the long run, the COVID pandemic was the worst government psyop in our history. Nobel laureates, scientists of the world lined up literally by the hundreds to tell us that this pandemic was extremely dangerous. There was no way to stop it except with the vaccine. We know that without any doubt now it was all just a massive global psyop orchestrated by, conducted by the governments of the world and their sycophants in the various bureaucracies. Even the New York Times, although a day late and a dollar short, now admits that denial of the lab leak theory was wrong, a lie from the beginning. Personally, though, it seems to me that the lab leak theory is wrong also because the evidence points not to a lab leak, but to a purposeful release of the virus, so the bioweapon often referred to as a vaccine could be forced on the world's people. We can no longer rely on the decency of those in government when deciding whether or not to believe government, because they usually have no decency. Their lack of decency, their utter lack of decorum, no longer shocks us. Their foul language, their lack of decorum on the very floor of the House and Senate have become commonplace. This is sometimes rather frightening as one stops to consider what kind of people voted to elect such people. I try not to dwell on that for too long, because when I do, the future starts to look dark indeed. Skepticism has its problems as well, however, and the cost of never fully buying in should be considered, because it will put you at odds with the human tendency to take sides, to take comfort in the side you're on. If you talk to people in your social circle, friends, people at work, people at church, you will find many people who have lost friends or family members because of political differences. When people are afraid, they take sides because there's some reassurance of certainty, some comfort that the authority they follow is most likely the right authority, and the other view is just plain evil. Using independent analysis is forbidden in the political world because it makes you a denier, may place you outside the comfort zone of approved opinion. In addition, using research and analysis, though very possible in today's internet world, is emotionally difficult, and authority is very hostile to it. For example, the censorship of any dissenting opinion concerning COVID and the vaccine on social media is now admitted even by the social media company owners. Just keep people in the dark. By censoring their search for the truth, they will be deprived of useful information. That would include potentially life-saving information as effective COVID treatments other than the accepted vaccine. Let me illustrate my point with a quote from Richard Fernandez of the Belmont Club. Quote, "Was there really gold in Fort Knox? Was Biden truly competent? Our heads started to spin. Dallas dug the grave. Wuhan filled it in. For better or worse, complete certainty is dead in the political domain. What we have now are expectations, probability distributions, and a posteriori Monday morning quarterbacking. We are back in the world before the cannon. The good news is we've been there before. What died on the day JFK was shot in Dallas was the idea that the public could always rely on authority to tell them the truth. It's a lonely feeling to stand by the graveside and realize that to a greater or lesser extent we will have to figure it out by ourselves," end quote. I will once again assume a little poetic license and try to interpret Mr. Fernandez's comment. We can no longer rely on the government to tell us the truth about anything. In fact, trust in government was buried in JFK's grave. Whenever the government or its spokespeople give us an explanation of whatever disaster the government has caused this time, that narrows our search for truth a little bit, because we know that whatever we have been told by government is a lie. Therefore, at least that explanation is eliminated. The difficulty lies in the fact that never before in history have ordinary people had more access to more information than right now. We're told there's more computing power in the small smartphone we hold in our hands than in the computers NASA used to send Apollo 11 to the moon. In other words, we all have the capability to find out for ourselves if we really want to know. The trouble is that smartphones have replaced education, and they are enabling public education's destruction. Has public education become nothing but government propaganda, even brainwashing for generations of children? I'm not talking about the pipeline that sends kids of a certain social class to the Ivy Leagues. I'm talking about the untold millions whose kids go to public school, who want desperately for those kids to have a better life than their parents had, and better than the life that is clearly visible ahead for them. When the Department of Education was started by President Carter, it had the laudatory goals of funding education and making it available to all regardless of means. It has instead ruined education, or at least contributed greatly to its its downfall, by placing it all in the hands of the federal government, which I just said could not be trusted to tell the truth about anything. All it has really accomplished is to act as a go-between, feeding money into the system to support the teacher unions, who will in turn vote for their own largesse, ignoring the needs of the kids. For example, the average money spent on education per child in the United States is $17,000 per year, the highest in the world. In some locations which have the most powerful politicians, it's much higher than that. New York City, for example, the figure is $33,000 per year. The money spent per child does not seem to be accomplishing anything for the kids. Nationwide, upon graduation, 70% of our kids are not proficient in reading. More than 70% are not proficient in math. In other words, they're high school graduates, but they can't read or count or do basic math. The good news is they have smartphones now, so they don't have to know how to read or make change at the grocery store. It's always an easy fix for politicians. Just take more money from the people, flood it into a failed system. That is a lot easier for politicians than the politically dangerous act of doing something that might actually help. In conclusion, folks, who killed John F. Kennedy? Can we at least agree that we should know who's killing our leaders? JFK, RFK, MLK, all the others whose murderers are hidden by the fog of history. In 1963, there was no NSA, no National Security Agency, only the CIA, so the government didn't have the capability of knowing everything about everybody as it does today. The CIA today, with its 25,000 employees, its massive worldwide outreach, to whom is it loyal? Certainly not to the American people. Finally, folks, who killed JFK? Government and all its downstream agencies are uniquely capable of covering their own crimes, so I no longer expect the truth to ever come out. What we really know is that the government's explanation, as usual, is nothing but a pack of lies. At least that's the way I see it. Till next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.